Hi, everybody. I'm John Boutte from the Greater Buffalo Sports Hall of Fame, and welcome to Back in Time, a new Zoom show where we catch up with figures from Buffalo's sports past. We hope to have a new show coming every week, and we are very excited to bring you the Buffalo sports fans all over Western New York and beyond. Tonight, we're so happy to welcome former Sabre and Buffalo Bison and hockey broadcaster Mike Robitaille, as well as former voice of the Bisons, former voice of the Sabres, and current voice of the Nashville Predators, Pete Weber. Gentlemen, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us tonight.
This is absolutely great. I've been looking forward to this ever since you first booked us, John.
Same here. Pete hasn't changed a bit, so let's roll and have some fun here.
It's fantastic. We're excited about this.
Same here.
When I started thinking about how I was going to do this and who were going to be my first guests, I always listen to the public, and I have a lot of people always ask me, Mike Robitaille, how's he doing? It's been 6 years since he's been on television. How's he doing? I always have to fill him in on how is he doing. And of course, Pete Weber, I mean, everybody in West New York knows Pete Weber. So it was easy choosing you two guys. Mike, I'll start with you. You came to Buffalo in 1970. You were with the New York Rangers. And can you talk just a second or two about how you came to Buffalo?
You talking about the move with the Buffalo Bisons?
That's correct.
Yeah, everyone's favorite team.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing what the uniform does, but best uniform in hockey history. I was playing in Omaha and in the minors, and we had just won the championship, and Emile Francis called and said, you're coming up to play in New York. And they were playing against the Canadians, I believe, at that time. And by the time he talked to me and I hung the phone up, in a matter of hours, they had lost the crucial game and they were out. So there was no place for me to go. I had to sober up real quick when he called, but I got back to pleasure right quickly after seeing they got beat out. But eventually the phone rang again, and it was pack your bags, you're going to Buffalo. And so I went to Buffalo and played with the Bisons, which was, you know, a lot of guys there were like my heroes when I was a kid. And they're much older, of course. The Central Hockey League, as you might remember, for the all young upcoming kids just coming out of junior that were really just on the cusp of stepping up. And the American League was more veterans on their way out, yet, you know, they had put a good show on, good hockey players, but they just couldn't break the National Hockey League. So I came in and started playing with this group of very mature players that I have never got to play with before. They're usually just young guys.
And winning the Calder Cup was a nice welcome to Buffalo.
We did. That's the one thing Bobby Orr did not do, was win 2 championships in 1 year. And we had won the championship in Omaha with the Omaha Knights. Players on that team, I mean, Silaps, Moose DuPont, like Andre DuPont, and Philadelphia. Donnie Luce was there, Jack Eagers, Jim Kurlicki. It just went on and on. Some really talented team.
And most went on to prolific NHL careers as well.
They did, and to play against, you learned a lot. You know, it's just you're basically playing against guys your own age. But every team, John, had 3 or 4 veteran players. You know, like we had guys like, oh, you're gonna love this name, you know, Forbes Kennedy. These guys that punch the referee in the mouth and things like that. Guy was really tough. I mean, he was scary. I was scared to play with him, let alone against them. Some really talented players. But you know what I learned? I learned something, and it always seems to come from mature hockey players, guys that have been through the mill. But players that were in that league at that time, like Tulsa, their playing coach was Marcel Pranavo. Now, Marcel Pranavo would be arguably in the top 24 defensemen to ever play the game of hockey. And I watched this guy, John, his career was over, okay? He was done. He was just kicking in as a playing coach and getting his coaching career done. And no one on either team or either in Canadian, could work as hard as him. He was the hardest working guy I think I ever watched play. And Houston, they had like the great veteran defenseman Al McNeil, who coached the Habs for so many years. These guys worked, they sweated from top to bottom the whole game, and they're playing like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And what inspiration. They inspired me so much.
Yeah.
They made me so much better. I just look at those years as just a beautiful stepping stone. And then that nice touch in Buffalo, that inspired me again. And so everything was going good at that age, John.
That's great.
Yeah.
And Pete, you coming to Buffalo, you were all over the country in broadcasting before you came to Buffalo, correct? You had.
Well, when I first came, I came to Buffalo 2 different times. So when I came in 1976, I had been primarily in my hometown of Galesburg, Illinois, South Bend, Indiana, and then answered at Adam Broadcasting and came to the station the people back in South Bend thought that I owned because the call letters were WEBR. So that confused a few people. But yeah, and then before I got the chance to work with Roby, I had been in Los Angeles, Albuquerque, and Seattle.
Wow. And you came to Buffalo, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, they paired you with Sam Anson.
Sam Anson, myself, and another guy, Jim Militello, who sent us his audition tape, Tails Out. So when we played that back on a regular recorder, it sounded like he had to be Russian. So I said, let's flip this over, and maybe he's English.
Oh, God. And then you left and came back, and I believe you were paired with the great Stan Barron. Can you talk a little bit about Freeform Sports, about Stan Barron?
Well, and I'll tell you, actually, the first trip with Stan and Van for a Bills game in Cincinnati, which turned out to be Kay Stevenson's first win as head coach of the Bills. But they taught me some very good lessons. We're in the restaurant after we arrived at Cincinnati, and both of them asked the waitress if they could have a stack of receipts for use later on. And, without such veterans, how would I have learned such a thing as that? It was incredible.
My God. That's hysterical. What a great welcome to Buffalo.
You must have paid for the bill that night.
No question.
Okay, you learned that real quick. Did you not go out for dinner with them?
Rookies always pay for dinner.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to Mike for a second. Mike, you're in Detroit now, okay, in 1971, and you find out you've been traded to Buffalo with Donnie Luce for Joe Daly.
Right.
You had to be thinking, wow, I'm going back to where I had success with the Bisons. I mean, talk for a second about the joy you must have found you were coming back to Buffalo.
Well, first of all, no matter how well you played in junior in those days, you pretty well spent a couple of years in the minors until you broke into the National Hockey League. So I was just so grateful and so happy to go any place. But Buffalo was just, the topper because I had a little taste of it. And I loved this town. It was terrific. I had nothing but good times here, enjoyed the people. The people were very nice to me. And I felt comfortable. I was close to the border. I wasn't far from home. My friends and my family, if they wanted to, they'd come down and see me play. And I finally got away where I was stepping into a situation where I could be a top 4, top 5 defenseman and really have an opportunity to grow as a hockey player. So
you probably had a table. You probably had a table at Ace's Steak Pit too.
Yeah, Ace's, and there's another bar we used to hang out at too. But geez. Oh,
named after the guy from Hoboken, New Jersey?
Huh? Yeah.
That's
but
right.
anyways, when I found out, I was up at our cottage. We had a little summer home about maybe 100 miles north of Toronto, where I grew up in Midland, Ontario. And the phone rang one day, and like our cottage was way, way out on Georgian Bay. And so it was like a party line. We used to have 2 long and 1 short, and that was our line. Well, when that thing would ring, everybody would pick up and listen. Well, it was Punch Imlach calling. And everybody in town knew about the trade almost as quick as I did because they're all listening to the line, right? But I got a call and he said, he says, I've been trying to get you since you're 16 years old. And he said, I finally have you. And welcome to Buffalo. And Detroit had called me before that. I think it was this Baz Bastien, the assistant coach, said, look at the general manager's in a meeting right now, Ned Harkness. He said, I just want to let you know that you've been involved in the trade and you're going to Buffalo, and Ned will be right back and he'll fill you in all the details. And 43 years later, I'm still waiting for Ned to call. So it was, there he was, as on my way to Buffalo, and I had an opportunity to really expand my, show my abilities because I couldn't do it in New York. I mean, for me, it didn't matter how well I played. How many championship teams I was on? I was on 2, playing like 30, 35 minutes a game. Like in Omaha, I can remember in the playoffs, I was going like 40, close to 50 minutes a game. And I was just never off the ice, and I played well. I couldn't play any better. Go to training camp, John, you didn't even get a sniff. The first jersey you got was like a Buffalo Bison jersey.
Yeah.
It wasn't even, you wouldn't get a New York Ranger jersey. And if I was to make the New York Rangers, just to give you an idea how tough it was to make it, I had to beat out 2 Hall of Famers. Harry Howell, who was nearing the end of his career, I had to beat him out, or another guy called Tim Horton.
Yeah.
That's what I had to deal with. So I had no chance. I wasn't going to get a sniff as long as I was in New York. So here I am in Buffalo. Their arms were wide open. General manager that loved me since I was 16, and ended up hating me. That's how I ended up here, and it was quite a thrill in my lifetime, anyways.
And I can imagine your joy when you found out that Tim Horton was coming to Buffalo in 1972, one of your idols.
Totally off the charts, and my hero, he was my everything. When he was here, I followed him around like a puppy dog. I mean, I'd listen, and I'd just kind of sit there in awe. And to go out for dinner with Larry Hillman, all those Stanley Cups that Morley had, and Tim Horton, and sit there, and listen and hear the stories. It was fascinating. I was overcome. I was speechless. I was just a typical kid with his mouth open, his eyes open, and just kind of kept his mouth shut and sucked everything up.
Yeah, and Pete, we'll go back to you. You moved to the Buffalo Bison baseball broadcast in 1983.
Yes.
Is that correct? And
yes,
what
sir.
about the Sabres? When were you with the Sabres? When did that start?
The Sabres, Mike and I were put together in 1984, 85, in our little studio between the dressing rooms and the yard at that end. And our guardian was Art Starks.
Oh, big Art.
The security man out in front, trying to make sure that nobody would get to us.
Big guy, you make 4 nice ones out of him.
Yes. And then, well, how about, but we would get some interruptions when Joe Crozier would come down the hallway and knock on the door and want to exchange some notes or something with us.
Yeah. Well,
the night he knocked on the door, John, and said, Pete, this is maybe within 5 minutes of going on the air. Scotty wants to see you down the hall. So I went, oh, what did I say last game? I walked down the hall, and all Scotty wanted from me was to tell him who was the pitching rotation for the White Sox, who were the Bison's parent at the time, because he was having his fantasy draft after the game that night, and he wanted to beat Ron Caron that year.
Well, he came to the right guy. He knew who to go to.
He was calling his bookie right after you talked to him.
Yeah.
And maybe Joe the Barber. I don't know.
That could be.
Joe passed away, by the way. We've lost Joe.
Yeah. Saw that. Pete, you started radio play-by-play with the Sabres in the mid 1990s. Is that correct?
Yeah, the last season at the Odd.
Were you paired with Larry or Danny?
Danny Garrett.
Okay, that had to be
Danny
fun
and I
too.
were together on that. Yeah.
Having Danny with you, and Mike, your time is mostly remembered in broadcasting with a show called Hockey Hotline that started, I believe, in 91. Was that correct? Am I right with
Yeah,
that?
around there.
92,
Yeah,
something like that?
that kicked up a little bit.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about the early days of Hockey Hotline, if you will.
Well, it started off with our advertising dollars were made from all the bars over in Canada. These 15-second spots, these girls were spinning around on brass poles, and but that was, whatever it took to make a buck. And with the old man, as holy and pious as he was, it was kind of interesting to see that, a buck is a buck, all right? When it comes to money, you do what you have to do. But we had very little furniture as far as an actual studio, and I had to do it all myself. I was on there like an hour and a half after games, sometimes 2 hours. And the problem was is that you couldn't cut it off, and I had control of the calls, Pete. They had the phone set right there, and I'd be, go, okay, let's go to the next caller here and the next caller there. And it was a bad call, I could cut it off and go to the next thing. So these calls would keep on coming in and in and in, and there were no shows on after long TV shows as such in the National Hockey League at that time. So anybody that loved hockey had their eyes glued to this every game, and they loved it. It was like their Bible, and they just look at that good-looking guy.
There's Claudia.
Is that Jacques Plante?
Is that Jason?
Cheesy. It's cheesy.
It's cheesy.
Yeah.
Got the stitches.
Hi, honey.
Hi, Claudia.
How are you? Look at that.
How you doing,
Nice
hon?
to be here.
Good. How are you
Good.
guys?
We're doing great. We're having a lot of fun.
Good, good. Keep it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we'll do our best.
We need hockey now, but more than ever.
It's tomorrow night.
Yes.
I'm ready.
Great.
Good.
It looks
She's
like
not
it.
going in goal, though. It's
No.
either going to be UC Searles or Pekka Rinne.
I gotcha. And Pete, Empire Sports.
Oh, man.
Talk a little bit about Empire Sports and some of the cast of characters that were associated with Empire Sports.
I mean, I got involved with it because of the Bisons at the outset when Empire Sports started in 1990. And, switching to television when they were doing the games. I mean, I got to do the no-hitter thrown by Bartolo Colon because of them. Some crazy nights. How about on field, your pregame show is Mickey Mantle and Mario Cuomo, who came in for a special night at the ballpark. That was a great night. So getting involved with that, we did a weekly Bison magazine show with them. I did the high school highlight show, and Claudia still asked me on Friday how Solvay did tonight. So that was going across the state, obviously. But and some of the other fun there for me was doing Bandits lacrosse. That was great fun, and to see, as I refer to him now, John Tavares the first. John Tavares II, his nephew, now of course playing with the Leafs.
John Tavares classic.
Yes. Oh, man.
What a player.
Yes. And our studio shows. I mean, and people might not understand this, but the NBA had special territorial restrictions, and we carried the early Toronto Raptors games. But to protect the New York Knicks, we had to do another show. I did Fan TV Nighttime. And though I wouldn't be on in Buffalo, I would be on from Batavia to the east on the night the Raptors played, filling in that bit of time.
Wow.
So that was when I had Mark the Bird Fidrich on one night, and he set my all-time record for the longest response to one question. And all I did to provoke that was ask him about a matchup he had with Dave Righetti at Silver Stadium in Rochester, and he went on for 12 minutes.
Isn't that something?
Without taking a breath.
That he would remember that too.
Yes.
After all the big times he had in Detroit, he would remember that. How great is that?
Tremendous. Just tremendous.
That is amazing.
Empire kept a lot of people off the street, boy.
Yes.
You
Both
know,
working, Roby, and watching.
Yeah.
Nobody was getting rich working there, but it certainly, when I think of all the guys that worked there that had 2 or 3 kids to feed, and that was their job. I mean, that was their main job, and it wasn't much, but it was a job, and they're very passionate about it. And like probably what I miss more than anything else, not being in broadcasting anymore, being retired, is probably the people I work with.
Yeah.
And usually it was the guys working on the camera, people doing some dirty work for you in between periods, and so on. I deeply, deeply miss those people. Think of them so often.
Well, a lot of them are still there.
Yes.
Yeah, when when they went down, when Empire went down, boy, there was a lot of friction with the hockey club and hard feelings and everything else, and they got that straightened out, and eventually a lot of the people working at Empire ended up working the broadcasting, being part of the broadcasting crew with the Sabres. So I was really happy to see that.
Yeah. Mike, I want to go back to you for one other thing. The hockey hotline that I remember the most was Dave Hannon, the night of Dave Hannon, when the game went to 2:00 in the morning. And I'll never forget this. You passed back over to Rick Martin, and there's Rick Martin sound asleep in the chair. And you guys had to carry on after the game. And I remember you saying you didn't think anybody would even be there, and it was bedlam. Can you talk a little bit about that game?
It was like went on and on and on forever. The bars were rocking that night. You could hear him behind for the people that would be calling you. But Rico that night, he just had an operation that morning, and he really didn't want to be there to start off with because he was in a lot of pain, and it was an operation that us men can only have, and it was it was pretty painful. Of all night from he'd have to be there at that time, the morning, and he did. He was a good soul, and we went on and took calls, and the longer the show went on, the better it got. And finally, I don't know, what was the game over? 2:00?
Yeah.
It was almost 2:00.
4:00 when Chris N, cut it and said, "Come on, we got to go home at some point." So
another game to play.
Yeah, and it was an endless night, but it was so much. The people were so excited. It was so easy. You're right inside their skin with them.
Yeah.
Such a passionate group that night, and it was a great night to remember. I remember that goal so well.
And Pete, were you on radio that night?
No, I was not. I had a Bison road trip that started the next day.
That's right.
So,
that's
but
right.
I was certainly watching, and Roby, I apologize forthwith. I have to say, I did not stay up the whole way with you, but my adrenaline was still going. And that particular experience helped me out so much here in 2016 with a game that Mike Fisher ended at 1:06 in the morning. And it was a school night and nobody left the arena.
I think I can remember that game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Hey Pete, you taught me, and I don't think I ever told you this, but I was talking about Marcel Pranavo and Al McNeil and these players, veterans of the game and so on. And of course, when I started getting into broadcasting, it was the early years for you, but you were like a veteran at that point. And what I learned from you is something that we all have to be aware of in broadcasting, was to really work hard and get prepared. And you're just off the charts. You're like over the top being prepared. You have more stuff and facts and figures, and man, I'll tell you, it just like another thing. It just it inspired me, like those older players did, and I learned a lot. You didn't have to say anything. I was just watching you and what you had in front of you to work with. And a few times when I was over to your house, and your wife was good enough to let me in, you were there just packing away, man, hammering away at stuff. You had filing cabinets full of everything you could want to think of. So
some of those cabinets are out here in the garage right now, Roby.
All right, yeah, I can imagine you have about 5 or 6.
Don't throw anything out. Don't throw anything out.
I don't.
Pete.
No,
I don't.
I know you don't. Yeah, Mike, I'm glad you brought up people that inspired you in broadcasting, and that's my next question to Pete. I know a couple of people that inspired you in broadcasting. I'm thinking of maybe Vin Scully and and Harry Carey might be too.
Yes.
But can you talk a little bit about your inspiration for broadcasting?
That got me into it, that at least directed me toward it. Yeah. Growing up in West Central Illinois, we got all those 50,000 watt clear channel stations that carried the sports. So I'd get WJR Detroit, Tigers and Red Wings, WCCO in Minneapolis, the Twins and the Vikings, and the North Stars were on another station. WTMJ in Milwaukee with the Milwaukee Braves, folks, and the Green Bay Packers, the Chicago stations. My hockey inspiration was Lloyd Pettit doing the Chicago Blackhawks.
Yeah, Lloyd Pettit.
But my real inspiration to get in the business was Harry Carey out of KMOX in St. Louis. Here I'm 7, 8 years old, listening to the Zenith tabletop radio late at night. And he would go on, and I could tell that he and Jack Buck were having so much fun. A few years later, I found out they were getting paid to do that. So I thought maybe that's something I could perhaps aim myself toward. So my senior year of high school, I pinched a nerve on a blocking sled and couldn't play football. So I got a job with the hometown Galesburg Register Mail newspaper, taking the calls on prep games on Thursdays and Saturday nights. And then they sent me out to cover a game. So I was over near Peoria, Deer Creek, Mackinac. I couldn't believe this. You'd call this a C-level high school league, small school, but there were 3 radio broadcasts going out of their press box that night.
Wow.
So I get in the press box and squeeze in and get a little spot for me. And right next to me was the morning drive team for one of the Galesburg radio stations doing the game. It's 8:30 on a Friday night. These guys have worked early morning radio all week. And what did they have to do to fortify themselves? Coffee. Well, we all know what happens with a lot of coffee consumption. Sooner or later, you got to go. So Jim Swickard, who was doing the play-by-play, handed me the mic and said, "Here, you take this while I'm gone for a while." And I was able to work my way through it. And that's what sort of convinced me I might have the capabilities of doing this. So that really was direct inspiration in the time of somebody had to do it.
That's amazing. Sometimes, it's thrust upon you.
Hey, John?
That's great. Yes, Mike.
When I was talking about broadcasters, that was something else I wanted to be other than making the NHL. I wanted to be a broadcaster. As a matter of fact, my first hockey card in the back, there's a character of me skating down the ice with a microphone in my hand. And it says someday Mike would like to be, when hockey's over, Mike would like to be a hockey broadcaster. And that's when, 19, 20 years old. So it gives that some credibility to what I'm saying. But that was when I was I was the baby of 11 kids, okay? And I had to sleep up on the 3rd floor, and it was so cold up there. I mean, in the winter time, it was beyond belief. I mean, it was just ridiculous. Icicles hanging off the sea. It was terrible. And we would get into bed, and I would take the old Marconi little small radio and bring it into bed with me and put it under the covers because it was the old tube job.
Yeah,
right?
warmth.
And it would warm me up, and it would be warm as toast in there. And I used to listen to and just dream that someday I'll be good enough maybe to play for the Fort Wayne Comets.
Oh,
Bob Chase.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I those players, Lenny Thornton,
Yeah.
Ivan Prediker, it goes on and on. All these players were great idols of mine, and I never got to see them. I got to play against a couple of them later on, but that's, broadcasting was, I wanted to do that all along, but unfortunately, I guess hockey came first.
Well, I assume you watched a lot of Hockey Night in Canada, a lot of Foster Hewitt.
I did. Boy, that was it, man. We would at one time, what really was tough to swallow, they wouldn't come on the air until halfway through the game. And of course, Murray Westgate, who was doing hockey, what did he say? Esso, right?
Yes.
He'd do the average, he'd tip his cap and just happy motoring. Up
Yeah.
to you, Foster. And Foster, would take it and the game would start. And of course, it just, I'd go to bed just dreaming and dreaming all night about, wanting to play hockey in the National Hockey League. It was just everything. And, and you'd pick up a lot of radio games. It was really great.
Yes.
I could pick up the Detroit station, Pete, which
Yep.
was terrific. And St. Louis would come in. I think in those times, it was like the St. Louis Braves
Yes.
were playing at that
Phil
time.
Esposito played for them. Yes.
Yes, he did. Yeah, Boom Boom Karan, and a lot of good players went through there. So
Dan Kelly there? Was he?
no,
Dan
that
didn't-
was
Dan
was
didn't
way
go
before.
there until the second year of the Blues.
Oh,
The first voice of the Blues was a guy named Jack Buck.
Oh, yeah.
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 Guy named
He
Jack
never
Buck.
made it. He never made it.
I think he did something later. I'm not too sure.
What was
I think it's
his,
gonna be a home run. I can't believe what I just saw.
What kind of
Jack
guy
Buck.
was he, Pete? Was he a cross type of person or
Jack Buck?
bitchy type of person, or was he nice?
No. No, as a matter of fact, he would do NFL radio games on Sundays and oftentimes would come to cover the Bills for national radio. And one time I had just thrown a break in the pregame show in the booth at Rich Stadium, and the door creaked open behind me. He goes, "Hey, Pete, tell me about my kid. Is he doing all right with Louisville?"
Wow.
So he was watching over Joe very carefully.
Yeah.
I hope you gave him a good recommendation.
Absolutely. And
He
Joe
turned out pretty good too.
Yeah, I still run into him every now and then, and he was Jack Buck's wife to be. Lived in the apartment next to Terry and Sheila Crisp.
No.
Boy.
Yes,
How about
Joe's
that?
mom. So
Isn't
Terry and Sheila knew Joe's mom.
Hmm.
that
before Joe was
amazing?
born. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, let's talk a little bit about a show that I believe you're both on. Pete might have been on as a guest, but Mike, you were on Sharpshooters on the radio.
Yeah.
With
It was, yeah.
with the great Jim Kelly.
Yeah,
Talk a little bit
2 hours.
about your time on the radio.
The best radio show I ever was involved with. It was that show was red hot, and Jim had all the scoops. Going through the roof. He had so many good stories, and if he was willing to break them during the show, it was just fabulous. He'd come in and tell me some things, that man, it just he knew a lot. He was well informed, well plugged in, terrific writer, just a fabulous guy, very down to earth, easy to get along with, very committed to his friends. I really miss him so much. It's funny, this day even, I told his wife, Susan, a couple of times, I said, when you go to a funeral, you get a little mass card. And, I don't make it sound like it's corny or anything, but I keep it on my end table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't throw it out or anything. For some reason, I just keep it there. And he made a difference in my life. Guys like him and Tim Horton and a few other individuals, that you'll never forget, that really, really had a profound effect on how you operate and deal with people.
We're
I
lucky when
communicate
we.
with Sue still on Facebook.
Yes,
That's right.
he's a sweetheart.
We're lucky when we have people in our life that have such an impact on us. And I know
Yes.
Jim influenced a lot of the younger kids today
Oh yeah.
in journalism. Just a hard worker, a great person,
yes.
and respected by the players too.
Very much.
John, the guys talk about him to this day. And the guys that are working the beat now, they just absolutely, they learned so much from him. They just love the guy. And, a lot of people, he really made a difference in their lives. He was a great, showed a lot of leadership for them.
He was plugged in before we had cell phones. So
Yes.
I wonder how much easier that might have made it for him.
Oh,
Were you
man.
around the night him and Hasek got going? Remember they were
I had just,
pushing and grabbing ties?
I was leaving the air and was
Yeah.
going to the elevator in then Marine Midland Arena, and the elevator door opened, and Jim popped out of the door with his shirt and tie all over. And I know I had this quizzical look at him, and he goes, "Your goalie got me."
Oh.
That was the 97 playoffs,
Yes.
right? The 97
When
playoffs.
Steve Shields came in and saved the day.
Oh, Steve Shields did unbelievable yeoman's work in that series
Yep.
to save
They're
that.
doing-
Shutout in game 6 and the overtime win in
Yep.
game 7.
Yeah,
I
that
was
was
doing an interview with Steve Shields one night, and he's looking pretty anxious to, get the interview over with. But we're going along, and finally, he just got up and left, Pete, right in the middle. He says, "Excuse me, I gotta go," and he literally had to go. he had to go.
Yeah.
He just left.
Like the guy that gave me the microphone at the high school football game. He had to go.
I should have gave it to him, bring it into the washroom,
Yeah. Or do
Yeah.
like Leslie Nielsen did in the Naked
Yes.
Gun movies.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh God.
But that's an interesting interview for as long as it went.
That poor guy, one night, he's playing for San Jose. The Predators are out there. He gets pulled from the game at late in the second period. And that was one of those games where today it doesn't happen anymore. But we had a glass breakage in each period. The last glass breakage occurred right over his head, and all of that falls all over him. I thought that was the absolute height or the depths of what could happen to a guy. Here he got bombed, and then he got the glass.
Yeah. Still the only Sabres goalie in history to win Game 7.
That's right.
And he
Is that
won a
right,
game.
huh?
He won a Game 7 in San Jose as well
Yep.
against
Oh.
St. Louis. So yeah, nice
And yet
career.
the Predators beat him one time, getting outshot 52-17.
Really,
Yes.
it's amazing. Let me ask you both this. Whoever wants to answer first, chime in. You're on the air. What's the funniest or the hardest you've ever had it on the air? Maybe something funny happened, maybe something hard. Can you imagine? Can you think of a time when something that just totally unexpected happened?
Is this PG?
It's internet, yes. It's not on net.
You're not
network
going to
TV,
bring
so we're
this
good.
up, are you, Pete?
No.
You know what
I
I'm
got to think
talking
of
about?
something that's funny clean. Oh, yeah, you mean that night that we were on early?
The police, the chief detective from Amherst, his mother is watching the show. Pete and I thought, we're off the air. We're taking a break.
We weren't on yet, John.
Yeah.
We weren't. Oh, that was it. And I don't know what we had, some new equipment in our hands.
It was the IFB box.
Was it? And I made a very sexual comment.
Oh God.
And anyways, I'm out drinking the next night. I don't know where I was, but this guy tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Oh man," he said, "my mother, she was watching the other night. Do you know what you guys did?" And I said, "No, what happened?" He said, "Well, she listened. She was watching through the whole thing, and you guys were talking about this and this and that and everything that we shouldn't have been talking about." And then, of course, it makes me think of Ted Darling when he always used to tell me there's nothing livelier than a dead mic.
Right.
And it was dead. So,
Yeah.
anyway, so
That had
So
to be
we were
edited.
laughing, but we didn't want anybody else could hear us.
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
we came across loud and clear. Many people
So
heard
what it was, that was a merger of cable scope and international cable. And sometimes the engineers would just turn us on early, which we found out.
Yeah.
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 After that.
You didn't have a big red light going off saying
No.
you were on. No,
No.
that was, yeah.
Well, they got to
something.
clip those. Things. And a lot of times, you catch a guy back there, and he's just having a kind of a, his brain's a little dead at that point in time, and he doesn't do it. And you're there talking away some off-color remarks, and it doesn't go over too well with some player's grandmother who's
Yes.
watching up in Kirkland Lake, saying, "Hey, that guy with the gray hair said you're lazy."
Yeah.
We couldn't talk about Darren Poopa like that.
No.
Yeah.
Mike, I want to ask you another one about on Hockey Hotline. You made some comments about Dougie Gilmore that might have ruffled his feathers a little bit. I remember, and Dougie wasn't playing to his ability. And one of the best things I liked about you on air is you didn't pull any punches. I mean, if somebody was slacking, you were there to say, he's just not pulling his weight. Talk a little bit about Doug Gilmore, who,
Yeah, doing your job like that, first of all, John, it's a high wire act because you're always trying to satisfy the owner, you're trying to satisfy the player and his family. You don't want to totally embarrass them, and you're trying to keep your dignity and credibility and just be an honest person and tell the fans, don't take advantage of them and fill them in what's happening, so that when you say something good, they're going to believe it.
Yeah.
So, but you have to play both sides to make that happen. But I was driving back from the cottage up in Canada and the phone rang and Brian Blessing called me and said, "Holy shit, did you hear what happened?" And I said, "What now?" And he said, "Gilmore, they had a big press conference and he's quitting or leaving or something like that." And he said, right at the end, he said, "The only thing I wish I would have done before I left Buffalo is to punch Mike Robitaille right in the mouth." And I kind of took that as a compliment. Gee, I said, somebody must be doing their job. And I love Doug Gilmore. You couldn't find a bigger fan than me. I used to bug everyone to get him, bring him in here. He'd be beautiful for the last half of the season, just to bring that credibility to the dressing room, settle things down, give them a little confidence, and tap them down a little bit for some big games. He would be a great influence in the dressing room. And
So he didn't kiss you. He didn't kiss you like he kissed grapes.
No, I don't think so. He would have, if he had a gun, maybe, but that was it. He just wasn't living up to his ability. And, the guy was here for 3 months? And like a couple of people told me, a couple of his teammates, as a matter of fact, he says, "You're great. Did you bring him in here?" And the guy doesn't draw a sober breath in 3 months.
Yeah.
And he's supposed to be, our savior and everything. And what a disappointment that was. Well, he's pretty popular in the dressing room, and saying what I did and pointing it out, that didn't put me in good stead with the players, certainly. But years later, when you talk to these players, they kind of come across now that they're older and say, "Oh yeah, watch you all the time. We love you and keep it going. Don't change what you're doing." And that was the Doug Gilmore story. Who is he kidding? I mean, the guy, Doug was a tough little guy.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a fight in NHL history that he didn't start and where he didn't end up leaning against the boards while the fight was going on and watching everything. He wasn't exactly one to stay around for the tough part of it. So
Yeah.
my dream was, I think you mentioned that you'd like to be caught, or I told him I'd like to be caught in a phone booth with you for about a half hour. And I feel very comfortable coming out of that in the right order.
But now you have to explain to a youngster what a phone booth is.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can tell you a story about Doug before he got traded to Buffalo. Claudia and I took Derek Plant out the night before a game here with Chicago, and Doug just dropped by with us. So he's sitting down at the table, and we're talking about, has he been disappointed with his time in Chicago? And he goes, "You're darn right I am. They promised me when I signed, they were going to sign Brett Hull too. They lied to me." So I came on this trip with all my gear, home and road, because I'm ready to get traded. Well, I think about 48 hours later, he was a Sabre.
He was right.
Imagine somebody in the NHL lying to you. I can't imagine. He was a great player, though, John.
Yes.
I mean, this guy, he was a leader, man. He just like, he'd pick a team up right by the scruff of the neck and carry them on his back. And I loved him. He is one of my favorite players. Yeah, you know,
Crispy loved him in Calgary. Yeah.
I was going to say
Oh,
he
my
played
God,
for
but he
Crispy
did.
in Calgary.
Oh,
Yeah.
he just blood and guts. Did Crispy have him in Calgary?
Yes.
Yeah, won the cup in
did.
'89.
What did he say
Correct.
about him?
He loved his combativeness. He loved the fact, well, there's a little story about during a game. If you had a hat trick for the Flames, you got a free pair of cowboy boots. So they're going into the third period. He has two. And Doug, as they're going back to the room, goes, Crispy, get me on there. I want to get the hat trick. Crispy goes, I'll make a deal with you. If I get the boots, I'm going to give you all the ice time you can handle. So he got the hat trick. Crispy got the boots. And I think they were ostrich boots that he ordered for him. And Crispy still has those boots to this day.
That's fantastic. Guys, before we continue, I just got a message from Zoom, and they say they're extending our 40 minutes. So if you guys want to stay on,
Sure.
I'll stay on with you. Mike, are you okay with that?
Good. Let's talk hockey.
Oh, I love it. That's fantastic. Let me ask you about the question this. I know, Mike, you mentioned your affinity for Tim Horton and what he meant you as a player. But after you're retired, is there a player that a Sabres player, let's just say Sabres player, is there a Sabres player that you look at and just say, wow, this guy is not only talented, he's got everything going for him, he's head on his shoulders. Is there a player that you can think of that you really looked and said that to or about?
You know, John, I always look for the underdogs. I never, you know, the obvious players were never my favorites. There are certain players that really caught my eye, and maybe because I was in the same situation, you know, never being a star, just kind of plugging away to keep your head above water. But I can always appreciate those players. And the one guy, I know he's the toughest guy that ever played here, ever in Buffalo, and I mean truly tough. Not somebody necessarily you're scared of. You know, some guys you can't get to bed at night, sleep at night thinking about playing them the next night. He would just do anything and would never pick his spots or back up a bit. I just loved the guy. It was Pat Coletta.
Wow.
I mean, he could barely. I watched him in junior hockey as well as junior. I mean, he was down the ice. He was like an old washing machine, and he would just with a ringer on it. He was just had to do everything the hard way. Nothing came easy for him, and he worked and worked, and he was just endless and in your face, and you know, just take anybody on, and you know, do everything you could ask of a player. And I had so much admiration for him. I was always concerned about him that his career would be short because he never picked his spots, or he wasn't a smart, tough guy. He didn't think his way through being tough. There's a way to do that stuff. There's a way to be tough and still hide and kind of pick your spots without anybody noticing. He just, you know, all hell broke loose every night. He just opened the gates up and let him go. And he would rock and roll out there, and he was hell to play against. Boy, the last thing you wanted to do if you're playing against him was be on the ice against him.
Yeah.
That defenseman have to go back for the puck and have him chasing you. You pretty well know where your face is going to be before you got there. But that was you know, that's a guy that was unheralded that really caught my.
Yeah.
And I always had a great affinity for him.
As you know, every hockey team has to have 3, 4, 5 of those guys to succeed. The guys that don't get the press, they don't get the awards, but they're in the corner just digging for every puck, and that's a great example.
Yeah. Well,
Pete, how about you?
With guys like Brian Spencer and
Yeah.
Rick Dudley and
Yeah.
you know, players like that would kind of carry the day for you. Somebody had to do it.
Yep.
And Rick Dudley is one of the best brains of the game today.
The guy is just
so many
magic.
teams.
I'll tell you, he's such a good, oh man, he can read talent. Really, really good. I can tell you who could really read talent exceptionally well was John Muchler.
Yep.
Man, he could pick players out, and he was
Rest in
course,
peace. Just passed away.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we just lost him. And John was, he was quite a guy. He was interesting to talk to, and he could, on a dime, boy, his lid would blow right off his head, and he could get so fired up over something, and yet he
Yeah.
was just relentless as far as friendship was concerned.
And I think about John Anderson too,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
working with Punch,
Absolutely.
and
Yes.
finding guys.
Yeah.
Really, another great scout. He brought a lot of great players into this organization, that carried this team for many, many years, and did a lot of the dirty work. He's scouting is everything, man. I'll tell you, there's a guy you want as a scout would be Rick Dudley, and if you control him a little bit and his mindset, I'd love to see him, have a position. I mean, anyone that's a general manager, first thing they should do is go out and hire him as an assistant, just to be there and with him, bounce things off him.
Yeah.
Certainly run your scouting department, because they didn't get much better than him. He was exceptional when it comes to picking out talent.
I had
Pete, what-
three favorite players with the Sabres.
Go ahead.
What's that?
Favorite players I had with the Sabres, all of the same ilk: Rob Ray, Brad
Yeah.
May, and Matt.
Yeah.
They were the guys that helped, self-proclaimed perhaps, and no, not by them, but by management, as the hardest working team in hockey. They were the backbone of that. They really were.
That's true. And again, three unheralded guys. Brad May could light the lamp a little bit, but the other two guys were just grinders and
Yeah.
did
I'll
their
never
job
forget-
extremely well.
An LA Times article, I'm trying to remember who it was that Brad was fighting, but the LA Times writer reported that Brad May broke somebody's fist with his face.
Yeah, I believe that.
Man, could he ever fight? Boy, he could knock you clean out with a left or a right.
Yeah.
Either hand.
Yeah.
Either hand. You didn't know where it's coming from. And if he caught you, I mean, it's just, some guys hit you. A guy that used to throw a million punches in a fight was Bob Kelly in Philadelphia. Not Battleship Kelly. But
Hound Dog.
Hound Dog, right?
Yep.
And he would throw about 50 punches, it seemed like. He just,
Yeah.
it's like using you for a speed bag. And it was like he was hitting you with, he had pillows on his hands. You wouldn't feel anything. It was just like, poof, 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 poof. But boy, I mean, the speed of his hands were scare you to death.
Yeah. How about this? Let me ask you about this. I'll go back to Mike on this one, then Pete to you too. The best player you ever played against? I have to think Bobby Orr. But what do you think? I mean, best player.
I think Orr is by far. Well, I'm not going to say by far, but he is the best. The whole package. All right. I'm not going to say Gretzky, but I'll tell you what, John. It's easy to kind of blow by him and go with the traditional, Bobby Orr and all these guys. I'm going to tell you, man, when I watched some of his antics when he played, nobody could do what he could do. He was just like, he was so much better than anybody else. But Bobby Orr is my guy. I mean, I think his politics stink. But other than that, I grew up with Bobby, and he was just up the road from me. And we used to play against each other all the time when we were kids. And the scouts would come up there and to see Mike Robitaille, this kid from Midland is really something. You've got to see this Mike Robitaille. Well, that was really good. That was a nice war cry. Till 13 years old came along. And I don't know what the hell happened, but I don't know. I mean, he was always good, even when he was younger. But all of a sudden, at age 13, Johnny took off. It was phenomenal what he did as a 13-year-old. And a 14-year-old, he was the best defenseman in the Metro Junior A. I think who was he playing for? Neil McNeil, maybe, or somebody like that in the old Metro Junior A League. And then the next year he went to Oshawa, and he pretty well did whatever he wanted to do. But he's certainly my choice as the best player to ever play the game. And I'll tell you, I could, a lot of people could argue that with me. But don't argue with me when it comes to the best goaltender ever played. Because I played with Terry Sawchuk and Dominic Hasek, the best goaltender I have ever in my life ever watched. He's beyond words.
Not just unorthodox, but his productivity, and he got such a late professional start on this side of the pond, which I think people don't take into account.
I remember the first time I watched him play, guys, was he was with Chicago.
The final against Pittsburgh?
No, he hardly ever played. He was he was with Chicago, and he was a backup to Belfort. He'd get a few games, and that's it. But we were not doing the game on TV that night, so I was sitting with one of the scouts from Chicago. As a matter of fact, my God, that's terrible. I can't think of his name. He's
Bob Davidson?
No, he's from Buffalo.
Oh, okay.
Great. Everyone liked Rhett Simonix. I think married his wife's brother was the guy I'm talking about. Boy,
and he was in charge of Central Scouting when he passed away.
He was had a big time scouting job with Chicago, and I'm sitting there watching. And I'm watching this goaltender, man, the game ended up 2-2, and it should have been like 10-2 for Buffalo. I said, what's the story with this guy? How come, does he ever play? Did he get, he's all ass and elbows. He says, that's pretty well, and, but that is very early in his career, and he just kept on getting better and better and better. And I have never seen anyone, do what he can do as a goaltender.
Certainly unorthodox. I mean, I remember you saying he's like picking quarters up down there. He'd drop his stick and just, go all out.
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you this. If you had one choice of any hockey player in history, one choice, would it be Bobby? Would it be Wayne? Would it be Gordie Howe? Or would it be a goaltender like Dominic Hasek?
Goalies changed the game.
Goalie is the game?
Thank you. Go ahead, say it. You're right. They never get it. Goaltenders, what are you going to win without pitching? Where in the hell is this team going to go, the Buffalo Bills, without Josh Allen finally coming along?
Right.
They got a big-time quarterback. I mean, you have no chance. What you can do is be mediocre. You're a good mediocre hockey club baseball team. You better have some great pitchers and a great quarterback, man, because you're behind the 8 ball before every game starts.
Whitey Herzog always said,
I'll start my team off with Hasek, and I'll win a bunch of games I shouldn't even win.
Right.
And that happened in Buffalo. How many games did they win? They're being outshot like 44-15, 18, and they'd win 2-1.
Yeah.
It was endless, those type of games, Pete. It went night after night after night.
Yeah.
Yep.
Isn't that something? I mean, goaltending plays such an important part in hockey, and I think they get disrespected in the Hall of Fame. I mean,
I agree.
There's not a lot of goaltenders in the Hockey Hall of Fame, and I really think they need to take a look at that.
And then the draft. I mean, not very many, it's always a forward or a defenseman. How many times do you see a goaltender top notch could get picked number one? Yeah. It just, they're lucky if they're in the top 8.
Yeah.
A top notch goalie.
I mean, you get a Roberto Luongo.
Huh?
You get a Roberto Luongo that gets taken high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get some other guys taken by the Islanders.
Yeah.
One of whom got a 15-year deal, and I think is still getting paid on that. Now is doing radio in New York City.
Yeah. That's true. Pete, let's go to you for this one. You went to LA.
Yep.
To be the voice of the Kings. Tell us about your experience in LA with what all went on out there with LA.
Well, number one, I went to work first of all with Bob Miller. Still great friends with him, but our owner was a guy named Jack Kent Cook.
Yeah.
To say that he was a little eccentric would be, I mean, okay, for one example, we were at the Olympia in Detroit. Dave Hansen had just been traded there to the Red Wings. So I had him on the pregame show and talked about, a certain movie that he was in. And after the game, I got a call from Jack Kent Cooke. Peter, I've never heard of that movie. This must really be something. And this was in 1978, a year after it was released.
Yeah.
The way you talk.
Yeah. Strange guy. But, okay, so and then Jerry Buss took over in the summer before my second year. Cook finally was able to get his divorce with his first wife finalized. And then, because of the 50-50 split rule in California, he sold the Kings, Lakers, and Forum for $79 million. And then later, again, after all the assets have been split, he bought a company called Teleprompter, now Viacom, and then bought the Chrysler Building in New York because his divorce had been settled. And Milt Dunnell, his buddy in Toronto, called him and asked him about all this. And he goes, gee, Jack, you got all that money. She only got $42 million. He goes, well, I probably paid her more than I should have.
He was something, wasn't he?
Yeah. And he was married to her 42 years. So
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Pete, were you in LA for the Miracle on Manchester, or were you back in Buffalo at that point?
No, I was there at the game, but I was working for the Seattle Supersonics. We were playing the next night against the Lakers.
Wow.
So I was into that. Yeah. And
talk about being in the right place.
Oh, absolutely. And then I stayed over because the next game was done on subscription TV in LA, and they asked me to stay over and do the color with Stu Nahan, better from the Rocky films.
The great Stu Nahan.
Yeah.
Fantastic voice.
But I was also, when I was with the Kings at the start, the traveling secretary. We doubled up like the Chicago Blackhawks did.
Yeah.
So one day in January of '79, I go to the airport in Detroit to pick up a young man who only had an overnight bag. His name was Charlie Simmer. The next day was his first game at left wing with Marcel Dion and Dave Taylor. They kind of gelled and did all right.
What a line. Yeah, what a great line.
Yep.
Try to defend that line today. Oh, my gosh.
And who
Amazing.
was Charlie's agent? Brent Imlach.
Oh, no way.
Yes.
I don't know anybody that would know that.
Signed to Buffalo.
Yeah. I don't know anybody that would know that.
I played against him in junior hockey. Maybe that's where Punch knew me as a 16-year-old. He used to beat the hell out of his kid all the time.
Well, and I'm thinking about the Punch era. He came on a couple of talk shows at WEBR with me. And if you would listen to the show that night, you thought the next day everybody is getting traded.
Oh, yeah.
But you listen to Punch, and he was throwing it out. And then before I went to LA in 1978, I got a call, and you had mentioned him earlier, Roby. I got a call from the guy who was coach of the Sabres at the time, Marcel Pranavo. And he goes, this general manager in Los Angeles is a little crazy. George McGuire, be careful.
Yes.
Oh, man. This is great talk. I love hearing all this great stuff.
Well, Pete, I'll tell you the guy, John, you're asking before the toughest guy you ever played. I ever played against was Marcel Dion.
Yeah.
There are better players than Marcel when you say, who's the greatest player that ever lived. I mean, he's in the top 12 for sure, if not the top 6. But he was so small, Pete. I couldn't hip check him. I couldn't catch him at center ice. His lateral movements he was so quick from left to right, right to left. He was like Perot, except smaller and even quicker, and you couldn't get him. And on top of that, he was strong for his size.
Yeah.
He was like an Indian rubber ball. He was just, you couldn't do anything with him. And, you couldn't, even if you wanted to, you didn't want to do anything with him because you had to deal with Taylor on his wing.
Yes.
Come over and tattoo you for a couple left hooks and send you home crying. He was tough to play against.
When
the minors
Taylor, they saw him at Clarkson, and he might have been 5'8", 140 pounds. he sort of grew into that role the right way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you imagine
Yeah,
him
he
with,
was.
with a quality team? I mean, he spent his time with Detroit and L.A.
Marcel,
Hall of Famer, but
yep.
he
Marcel and Gilles Perreault, I think, were the two guys I was with on a day-to-day basis who the most made me drop my chin so many times by just the awesome things they could do, and just leave you breathless watching them. And I still got a piece of video in my head, Roby, from Marcel Dion working against then young Dougie Wilson. And Doug Wilson, much larger than him, Marcel just went underneath him and went in and beat Tony Esposito.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a great
that makes me feel better.
Mike, I hate
Put a
to
lot of
bring
years
this,
in, huh?
I hate to bring this up, Mike, but you had the unfortunate, I don't know how to say it, but you broke Gilles'
He should have
leg
known
twice.
better.
He should have known. He knew you, right? He knew you the second time. He knew who you were.
I knew where you're going with that.
Yeah.
I did. Yeah, I never understood why, I asked for it a couple of times and he didn't know, but all the years I practiced with him and he watched me play and so on, I could hit better, I could hip check better on one side than the other. So I would always have to kind of set my stick up in such a way that I could suck the guy in to go to the right instead of the left. So I knew where he was going before, we even thought about where he was going, because I knew I was going to draw him over there. I'd give players such a hole to go through on the right-hand side that you'd have to be the village idiot not to go over there. You wouldn't go to the left because I had everything over there, my defense partner. So you draw them into the right-hand side, you set them up, and bingo, So I caught Gilbert a couple times, and then unfortunately in Vancouver, that happened in Buffalo, as a matter of fact.
Tracy
So,
Pratt.
all those nice signs that were up there in the ceiling before the game. Nice to have you home, Roby, and wish you well. And man, they come tearing down.
They tore those down.
Yeah, they tore them down in a hurry. I wasn't a golden-haired boy that night. And then I got it was a 2-2 tie. The guy I was traded for was Guillermo. And I remember it was late in the game. Buffalo took the lead 2-1. I was with my defense partner, who I pretty well my whole career, was Tracy Pratt. And Tracy laid, I did a little button hook in the corner and picked up some speed, and he hit me with a perfect pass. And I said, I'm going to stuff this in the net. I don't give a shit if it kills me, And my idea, honest to God, I'm telling you the truth right now, is if I score a goal tonight, I'm going head first into the net. I'm going to grab the puck. I'm going to skate the length of the ice down to Dodo with her ringing that bell. And I'm going to take the puck and I'm going to throw it as hard as I can at Imlach. And hopefully he can catch it and, not hit it off his head. So I had a head of speed and I got by the forwards and I came down on the defenseman. I think it was Billy. I might have been Billy Height. I'm going down this way. Billy Height was on one side and Guillermo was on the other side. So I knew who I was going to go around. I never walked around a defenseman so bad, so quick, and so slick. It was like Bobby Orr all over again. It was really impressive. I was impressed. And I walked around him, and Desi was in that, the Jardin, and I gave him the puck. I said, come on, Desi, here it is, baby. Right there. Come on and get it. And he went for it. I pulled it back in, went around, and all there was a great, big, wide open net. I could have spit the puck in the net, put it in, and I made a big circle, threw my arms up, turned around, raced back to the net. I'm going to grab this puck with a big finish, go down, throw that punch, and Desi pulled the puck out of the net and shot it up into the crowd. And I couldn't get the puck. And that was a disappointment. one of the big disappointments.
Uh,
I really had that set up in my mind that I was going to do it. So
you got that on him though. You got that on Jerry. So you win that.
I feel
you
so
win that
bad,
fight.
to say even about Bert, but his ankle. It's never an issue with him and I. I mean, it's not. It was just that's long gone. But he's such a sweet guy, such a sweetheart. He wouldn't. Bert doesn't know how to get angry. He doesn't know. I mean, if he was capable of getting really angry and had this coal furnace in his stomach just burning, to just win at all costs, I don't know how great he would have been, John.
Yeah.
It would have been, he was one of the best that ever played. And
I think talent-wise,
didn't have
Moreau's the best I've ever seen play. I did.
I've
see
got a
Bobby.
name for you, Roby.
huh?
I've got a name for you. We can fill in
Who's
the
that?
blanks for your earlier story. E.J. McGuire.
EJ, thank you. Everybody's
EJ
favorite guy.
McGuire.
I loved EJ,
Yep.
and everyone loved EJ McGuire. And thank you. That's who I was talking about, EJ. Yeah.
We inducted him a couple years ago in the Greater Buffalo Sports Hall of Fame.
Did you?
Yeah,
Oh,
we
yeah,
did.
that's right.
Yeah.
You
We
did.
did.
Yeah.
So
I remember when he was assisting Mike Keenan in Rochester,
Oh man. Yeah.
and he would do the video for Mike with a very rudimentary video camera in the press box at the War Memorial. Then he'd come over, and when I was filling in for Rick Peckham or John Gertler, he would plug into the audio output of our radio board.
And Rick Peckham retired, Pete.
Yes. Jerry Helper and I had him out for dinner here when Tampa came in the last year.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice man, huh?
Yes. Great man.
Really, 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 really great guy, boy. I mean, it's people, salt of the earth, boy. You get a hold of a guy like that, you don't want to let him go.
Nope.
He was always very, very kind, very respectful, and did a great job for a long time.
Yes.
He's like you. He just keep on ticking.
Well,
I mean,
Hartford with Jerry Cheevers and
Yes.
Tampa with Bobby Taylor.
That's right.
yeah.
Yep. That's right. Where's Bobby now? He's
Bobby is doing like Crispy is here. He's a television host for the broadcast.
Oh,
I
okay.
got you.
Because that's the
Well-
great story. Bernie Perron had played 48 straight games one year, and they were going to have a big ceremony, and then all of a sudden, Freddie decided to start Chief. So after the game, they're asking Freddie about this, and he goes, "Well, I think it was Chief's turn. I had to put him in."
It was due.
Hey, you bring
Your
up
old
Perron's
coach,
name.
Mike. Your old
Yeah.
coach.
What's that?
Your old coach, Freddie Shiro.
Oh yeah, I had Fred in Omaha and here in Buffalo.
Yeah.
He didn't say much, but he had a way of everything just kind of clicked.
Well, he did a lot of this.
Oh, yeah.
Glasses on the bridge of his
A
nose.
lot of this. A lot of that. He did, but boy, I'll tell you, he was a smart guy.
Oh.
Very, very smart. He was kind of way ahead of the game.
First to really
And,
study what the Soviets were doing.
Yeah.
He did, one of the first ones to do
Yep.
it, right?
That's
And the
true.
So anyway, Perron,
yeah,
Oh. let me get this quick story. We got a half minute?
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm working the hockey schools. I'm playing junior hockey, and Bernie Perron is finished with junior hockey, and he had a year in the NHL. The expansion comes in. Philadelphia picks him up. So Bernie and I are working a hockey school, Halliburton Hockey Haven. Jim Gregory. I'm trying to think of the
Was
other.
Ren Blair there?
The Bird. That's who I'm thinking of. Ren Blair. Yeah, they own Halliburton Hockey Haven. So anyways, I was out of junior hockey and I needed a place to stay during the summer up there. And so Bernie and I would get a cottage together. And then, but the first year we didn't have a cottage. We had to stay out at the camp. So Philadelphia, and Bernie never trained a day in his life, but he got wind that the Walrus was coming up from Philadelphia. Who was their manager at that time?
Well, when they started, it was David Poyle's dad.
the Walrus.
Yeah, Bud.
Isn't that was his nickname? The one his dad. Yeah, good hockey man. And so David's dad was coming up to see him because they drafted him. And he wanted to have a talk with him and make sure he was tuned up and he understood what was going on and what they expected and so on. So to get back into the camp where we were staying, there was only a one-way road. So there'd be a guy at the opening up by the highway. He'd say, okay, you go through now. And then 15 minutes later, they would let 5 cars go the other way and back and forth. So anyways, Bernie was waiting all morning for him. And he got the call. The kid said, I think he's coming in. The guy out at the road said he's got the Philadelphia plates or whatever, Pennsylvania plates. So away goes Bernie, gets his sweatsuit on, his running shoes and a towel around his neck, and throws all kinds of water on his face and his hair's all wet. And the kid told him, he's coming, he's getting close. He's just coming over the hill now, Bernie. And Bernie just beats his ass right out the door, out the screen door, and starts chugging it up the road. And that's it. That's how Boyle got to meet Bernie Perrant, running and working to keep in great shape. Bernie never worked out a day all summer long, but you do what you have to do to make a buck, Pete.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's true.
So he signed that big whopping $30,000 contract. And
Yeah. Well, if you want a good Bison story via Crispy.
Oh, here we go.
So Gilles Villemure, the goalie. The Pastor brothers, for each shutout, would give him like $200 cash, a box of cigars, and a case of beer.
Yes.
Well, Gilles wasn't too much into the sharing aspect of his newfound wealth. Neither the beer, the money, nor the cigars. So one night it's getting late at the odd, and Donnie Blackburn on defense for the Bisons took the puck out from behind the net.
Bob Blackburn.
Yeah.
Donnie was the forward, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
His brother was the forward and Bob
Right,
was
and
the
drilled it right by Gilles Villemure. They're leading 7-0 or something. Everybody's going, what the heck was he doing?
Yeah.
What the heck was he doing? And then Crispy looked over at Freddie on the bench, and Freddie's doing this and looking up into the stands. Subsequently, after every shutout, guys got cigars, some money, and some beers.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got it figured out, huh?
Yes.
But that's true with the Bisons, John. That after every game, boy, the game was so simple then, guys. It was so simple in those days where, the Pastors and the Knox family, it was a beautiful thing. All right. No money to speak of, but it was great. It really was. It was something really romantic about it almost, the way it worked. Everything worked so nicely. It was so simple. And after we win a game with the Bisons, Ruby would come in with his brother. It was Sam, I think.
Yeah.
And if we won, he would have a box of cigars, and it was either $200 or $250. And I don't know, I think Ron Ingram was the captain then, or Bob Blackburn. And that was their job, was to take care of the money. In the next road trip, we would use that all up drinking beer. And it was just, can you imagine that happening nowadays? First of all, you'd never appreciate it probably, but that's just the way it was.
Yeah.
And the Sabres, after a game, I know it's changed, and I don't want to be, tells us the damn old stories again. I'm tired of listening to it. There's something really nice about Seymour and Norty, and Art would be out in front, Stark, keeping everybody back, and away would come the brothers, and they'd be whipping around the corner, just, shirt tails flying, and their overcoats, with all the tears and the rips in them and everything. But that was them. That's just, we used to tease them all the time about their overcoats. We bought them one for Christmas. We were so embarrassed, the ones they were wearing. And they'd come into the dressing room and talk to everyone.
Yeah.
That's all. Just the owners came in and talked, put their arm around you, you know, and thanked you and wish you good luck in the next game. And they, you know, a couple of people they'd be doing business with, they'd bring them in, and it was nice. It was nice memories. As I mentioned, not much money, but I'll tell you what, there's something special about those days. I'm so happy I went through it. It was just like working on Sabres hockey. When I got that job, Paul Whelan and Ted Darling gave me that job. And I did the job of, which nowadays would be of 3 people. Pete, if you remember, I'd do the pregame with you.
Yes.
Run upstairs, do the color with 3 minutes remaining, run down, do the replays with you, run upstairs again, the second period down, same thing in between, third period, run down and do the post-game show with whoever the host was.
Yep.
And I was pretty tired at night, you know, but that was a hell of a lot of work and not much money. Money. I keep on talking about money, maybe because I never had any. Grew up and I didn't have any. And those were, that's the way it was. But it was a great, I became pretty average broadcaster because of it. I found out, you know, the hard way, how to work the game and how to do it properly and so on, and what work was.
Yep.
So,
and I remember on the road, you and Lorenzo would call me on how to work some of the equipment.
We didn't even have, listen, they were so cheap over at BEN, they wouldn't get us an engineer half the time, right? So they offered us, they'd probably have to pay an engineer in New York, maybe $225, $300. They were union.
Yep.
They would offer us the job for $75.
Yes.
And now that was probably as much as I was making just working the game.
But it was US dollars, Roby.
Yeah. But that wasn't such a big deal then either.
Right.
Yeah.
Have to carry all that equipment. Remember, under the arms and drag all that stuff.
It was like a TV camera case.
Yeah.
Exactly. But there'd be like 2, and then there was another bag with all they'd have the rest of the equipment in there, the microphones and so on. So we'd get into New York, John, and they would insist that you would use a union guy. So this one guy had a big, remember he was wearing a big Stetson
cowboy hat? Cowboy hat and a big belt buckle.
Oh my God, they pay him by the pound. He was just great, big, ugly looking thing. He had no hair coming out of his nose, his ears. They said he had hair in the balls of his feet. This guy was just scary to look at.
Yeah, he was Bigfoot. Yeah.
Oh,
well,
boy.
He would be ready for the game to put the stuff in, you know, into the wall, plug everything in and get it ready. Testing. Have you got me, John DeMurl? You'd be the other end. You got me, Burl? And
the Pearl DeMurl.
This guy would reach in, John, and this is before the pregame show. We'd have it all set in. He'd take his hand, and he'd reach in all those cords. He'd just pull them right out of the wall. And he says, "Your call." He says, "You want to go on air tonight or not?" Yeah. And that was it. Either you use this union guys here or you're not going on.
Yeah.
So
that happened to me doing college hockey in the Garden too.
Huh?
That happened to me doing Notre Dame hockey in the Garden.
Really?
For the ECAC holiday tournament.
Yeah. Well, did you punch him in the mouth like I did? No, I didn't.
Guys, I want to bring up just one more quick person to talk about. I think he probably meant a little bit to both of you guys, and then we'll end it. The great Ted Darling. Pete, why don't you talk about a little about Ted Darling and what he meant to you and Sabres hockey?
He was, let me see the chronology. He was the first Hockey Hall of Famer that I got to work with. Later on, Bob Miller and then RJ, and then working around the others around the league. But so impressive. And my favorite story is still the blizzard of '77.
Yeah.
and young Joel Darling sitting in front of the TV with the speaker down with what maybe Joel invented Post-it notes that night because he kept passing notes to his dad. The score line on the TV screen back in those days, or time remaining. So Joel was listening, to it was probably Bill Hewitt doing the game that night, or Danny
Gallivan,
and doing the game and passing notes to his dad. And the brilliance of that, WGR that night still hired a road engineer at the Forum in Montreal. So the guy set up and he sent the crowd noise back to GR Studios on Franklin, and then they mixed in Ted off the telephone from Lockport. And if that story had not come out, nobody would have known the difference listening to the radio broadcast that night. That's when I really became impressed with Ted Darling.
I have to wonder if that telecast survives anywhere. If anybody has it, it's you.
I wish I did.
What a shame.
I'll tell you, I'll message Joel here in a bit and see if he has any.
Maybe he does. Yeah. Mike, what do you remember about Ted?
Well, I know after I got back from my last game in the NHL, I fractured my neck. So that was a sudden end to my career. But when I finally got back on my feet again, I came back to Buffalo. And I really had no savings to speak of. I never made much money in the game. And I needed work badly. So I knew that Ted called me and said, "Hey, would you do an interview with me? I want to use it in between periods and so on. So I'll drop by on the way downtown. I'll come by your house." So he came by and I said, boy, I was just telling myself, I can't screw this up. I'm going to do an interview. I'm going to blow him away. And I did. And it was a great interview. I really got good and animated in there. And I just had myself set up not to screw up the interview. And he brought it down and he played it. I guess Paul Whelan heard it or whatever. And they decided they were looking for somebody. And they asked if I could come in and do a game here and there. And I did. And I made sure I didn't screw up. But I guess to make finish the story is the guy that really opened the door for me was Ted Darling. Ted was very smooth, wasn't a yeller, spoke the game beautifully. His diction was incredibly good. He was easy to listen to, very comfortable, and exceptionally easy to work with as a color commentator. The guy that was well prepared for his job, just like Pete. And I was fortunate to work with him, and I fell into a good situation, I'll tell you, to learn how to be a broadcaster working with Ted Darling. So I'm always very grateful, and I have great memories and great thoughts about Ted Darling. I was a lucky guy to know him.
What it was like in the old days.
Well, he knew where everybody sat. He knew at the hometown of every fan, right?
There's
the puck
Joe,
goes to a man from Lockport, New York. How did he know that?
Then he tried to say, "Well, I have a seating chart at the odds."
Yeah, he did. He said that. Pete, go ahead and finish your thought. I know you had something you wanted to say.
Well, Ted, just an incredible memory. And it was funny to watch him work and to see the sense of humor he had. Roby, remember what it was like doing those April Fool's telecasts for Paul Whelan. And Ted was willing to do anything, put on a crazy wig, do whatever. I mean, YouTube still has some of those videos available for us to go back in time and relive. So he wasn't stodgy. He, like you said, easy to work with, and I thought a tremendous human being.
Well, that's great. Thanks, guys. Last quick question. You can only answer the question with the title, and that's it. Mike, favorite Beatles song?
Oh boy, there's so many, John. It's endless. Well, I guess at the end of the day,
Imagine John Lennon. Yeah, great
Yeah.
choice. Pete, what about you?
The Long and Winding Road.
There you go.
Love that one.
I was going to say, no kidding.
It's
Yeah.
like all of our lives, the long
Yeah.
and winding road. Guys, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for being our guest. You're both going to get a coupon for $5 off at Edie Adams Cut and Curl right here in Buffalo, New York.
Oh, okay.
Remember Edie Adams Cut and Curl?
Callbacks. I didn't know. Yeah.
And a buy one, get one free at Fox's Steak Pit. So
At Aces.
thanks again both for joining me, and it's been fantastic. And I'd love to have you both on again. Maybe when we have Paul Wheeland on and some of the other guys on, we'll have you back in. But
Someplace
thank you.
around April Fool's Day would be a very appropriate time.
There you go.
Yeah.
You're always thinking.
He had a lot of ammunition. I'll tell you, to use in April Fool's Day.
He
A
sure
lot of
did.
guys got involved. It was a lot of fun for the guys that are working the game over the years, and
Oh,
they were involved with it also. But
Maybe the best was the night he turned it into like a Channel 17, a public broadcasting,
Yeah.
where he did
Right.
the auction, the Sabres
Yeah.
version of the auction. And they were giving away, let me see, there was a little kid's toy stick, and that was a Frankie Sauvé game used stick, and things like that.
he was that small. JF Solvay.
Yep.
That's right. Well, again, thank you both. We're going to put this up on YouTube. We're going to get it up, and I'll get you both the link so you can watch it, and it's going to go on our Buffalo Sports Museum page too. Thanks again. I know you're going to make a lot of people happy with your words and what we've talked about. So thanks again.
John, it's a good idea that you're doing this, by the way.
Well,
I mean,
you know,
this is a great thing for history.
You know
we
what-
all
you know
love
what-
history.
the idea came from Seymour Four. Seymour
really?
Four, yeah, absolutely. He said we got to start getting these people's memories
Yes.
and their stories and start documenting these things. So I owe it to him. He's the one that kind of put the seed out there.
I'll tell you, great, before we leave, all right? It's just what we're talking about earlier years and so on. But Jeannie, Seymour's wife, of course, she was really nice to the players, to the wives, our wives. There was a time when we would go down, we'd have to be at the rink for a 7:00 game. We'd be down there like at 4:30. Well, the wives would have to come along with us, right? They'd have to drive us down, and they would have to stand out in the lobby waiting for the gates to open up. And they let me hit this. Anyways, it was really tough for them. They just had no place to go, and they just froze for an hour. And so she got wind of that. She ended up building a nice little room off to one side for the wives, and they had a place to go. And isn't it funny, after all these years, all the wives in those days, that's one of the first things they talk about. A simple thing like that probably cost them $150 in furniture.
Yeah.
And it was, here we are, how many years later, we're talking about it, and what a nice thing Jean did for the wives. So
Yeah.
nice.
Well,
I thought I'd just mention it to her.
She's going to be on next week with Seymour. We're going to have Seymour
Great.
and his
good.
mom. Yep.
Good.
So we're going to have her on, and God bless her.
Ask her
Is
if she
that
remembers
link
the
too,
time.
Pete?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Pete.
No, I just want to make sure I see the link on that.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure she remembers the time when I signed with the World Hockey Association, and Imlach screwed up the negotiations, never got me re-signed again. And I think he might have been on his 12th heart attack at that point. And Seymour had to step in. I got a call and said, Mike, would you consider coming back here if we can get you out of that contract with the New York Raiders? I said, damn right, because that's where I really wanted to be to start off with.
Yeah.
Well, they got me back when we redid a deal
Yeah. Just
that could have been done 6 months earlier, and just like that. And Jeannie Knox sent me home with a nice big blueberry pie,
Oh, God.
and that was it. So,
Isn't that
anyways,
great?
yeah,
John,
They
next
don't make-
we'll bring that blueberry pie.
They don't make owners like that anymore. So.
$40,000 and we'll throw in a pie.
A pie. Guys, thank you so much.
Okay.
Again, I'll let you have the link and have a great night. And tomorrow night, go Sabres. And Pete, good luck to you on opening night. And you're doing the broadcast. Is it home or away? I forget.
You're at home. Yeah.
You're at home. Okay.
We open with 4 at home.
Okay.
And I don't know because our next series is on the road in Dallas. At least that's the way the schedule is right now.
Yeah.
But Dallas had 17 guys out.
Oh boy, that may not happen.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope for the best and
Exactly.
have a great season, guys. We'll
Pleasure
talk to you
being with
soon.
you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Mike,
Bye.
thank you so much. John, thank you.
Good
Thanks
being with
again,
you.
guys. Good
Take
night.
care. Good night.